is MJ, and in today's tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to make our Granite Ridge mosaic blanket. The yarn that I've used for this pattern is Brava bulky weight, and I've used black and white. Of course, you can use any colors that you want. You will need 1,630 yards of black, and you'll need about 1,200 yards of white. So that's about 9 balls and 12 balls of the black. You'll need 2 hook sizes. So I'm using a 7mm crochet hook for the blanket portion. And this is a furl streamline hook. And you'll also need a 6mm hook for completing the border. And this hook is also from Furls. Okay, so before we get into the pattern, let's just talk about how to read the mosaic chart. This pattern here is worked in a multiple of 12 plus 2. Okay, so when your starting chain will be a multiple of 12 plus 2. So for this blanket, I'm just going to do the smaller swatch. So I'll chain out 26. But for the blanket, you'll be chaining a total of 122. And that's going to make our blanket, our finished blanket, is going to be 52 inches by 60 inches, and that will be with your finished border as well. So when you're working mosaic crochet, we alternate colors. So white will be color A, and color B, I'll be using gray. So we alternate A, B, A, B, A, B throughout the pattern. What you are paying attention to is not the design. Just ignore the design. You're going to be reading the boxes. So just forget the colors that you see, and you're either going to be doing a single crochet in the back loop, a drop down double crochet for an X, and a single crochet in both loops. I like to start and end the blanket with single crochet going through both the loops. The rest of the blanket though, every blank box you see will be a single crochet in the back loop. Every time you see an X, we do a drop down. So for row 1 and 2, row 1, you're just working across your single crochets with white. For row 2, even though you see white across here, it's all in gray. You work across all in gray. Once we get to row 3, our drop downs begin. When you drop down, you're working in the front loop 2 rows below. So you go down, basically you're going down to light colors when you do a drop down, and you're covering up your previous row. So that's where you get this pattern. So when you read the row, you're just going to work single crochets in the back loop, and then you drop down, single crochets in the back loop, drop down. And that's how you work across. We're always starting on the right and we work from to the left. We leave tails on either side of our work, but all of that will be covered up with the double border so you have no ends to weave. Okay, so let's just get right into the pattern and I'll show you what I mean. So put a slip knot on your hook and you're going to chain multiples of 12 plus 2. So for your blanket, chain out 122. This is a fairly big repeat. We're going from 3 all the way to 22. So I think I am just going to chain out my 12 plus 2 just so I can work through it quickly with you. Okay, so I've chained 14, you'll be chaining 122. So now I like to work in the back humps, the back leg of the chain when I go across, rather than, this gives a nice edge for working into when we do our slip stitch border. So just go through that back hump, it's sometimes referred to, the back leg. When you turn the chain, you can easily see all those little humps. So just work across and then I'll meet you up at the end. Okay, so at the end of the row, you're going to chain 2 and cut the yarn. Okay, the chain 2 is going to help to secure all those tails because we're not weaving any tails. We're just going to be trimming the tails up and hiding them in the border. Okay, so I'm going to use the light gray so it's a little easier to see. What you're going to do, this you're going to do every time you join. So I won't go through this every single time because we have 22 rows to go through. You're going to make a slip knot, put it on your hook. You're going to chain 2. So again, that's going to give us that secure tail, and you're going to join with a single crochet. The first stitch we're always going through both loops. Okay, so every row is going to start like this. Now you're going to work a single crochet in the back loop all the way across. So now for the blanket, you're going to have 121 stitches in total, and I'm just having 13, so I can work through it really quick. So all of these are going in the back loop. So you're just pushing your hook down the center, working only through that back loop until you get to the last stitch. And the last stitch is always going to end the same. We're going to go through both loops. So make a single crochet through both loops, chain 2, and cut. Okay, so first and last stitch always stays the same. And you really don't need to leave those tails too long because we'll trim them up at the end regardless. Okay. So let's take a look at row 3, which is what we're going to work on next. I'm going to do the chain 2 and join, and then we have 2 single crochet in the back loop, and then we have a drop down. Okay, so I'll show you this again, but I won't do this every time. So slip knot on the hook, chain 2. You're going to find that very first stitch, pull that up over that tail, whoops, and work your single crochet. And I just like to give them a tug always as I go as well. Okay, so looking at the chart now, the next 2 are in the back loop only. And the next one will be the drop down. Okay, so here's our next stitch. There is the front loop that's available, and this is the reason why we work in the back loops. These loops are available for those drop downs. So yarn over, we're going under that front loop, 2 rows below, completing a double crochet. Now the pattern is repetitive as it works across, and this is another reason why I love Mosaic. So once you know the pattern, you can just repeat it across the blanket. So we did our drop down, so back loop only in the next 2, drop down, back loop only the next 2, drop down, and just repeat that across. I'll meet you at the end. So I'm coming up to the end. So I've worked 2 in the back loop, and then the last stitch, single crochet through both loops, chain 2, and give it a cut. Okay, so for row 4, we're back to color B, and I've worked my single crochet in the first stitch, chain 2, single crochet. I know this is hard to see. My printer comes out dark, but the next stitch is a drop down, 3 in the back loop, and then our pattern is a drop down, single crochet back loop, drop down, 3 in the back loop, and then we repeat that pattern. So this is how it's gonna look. So I've done the single crochet already. We're gonna drop down right here into that loop. Now I'm going to work 3 in the back loop, 1, 2, 3, and My next drop downs go on either side of this white drop down, and I like to really eyeball out my pattern so that I don't mess up. Okay, it's really easy if you just get one stitch off to mess up this pattern. So kind of pay attention to where you're placing your stitches. So there's one drop down, back loop, drop down on the other side. Okay, then our next 3 stitches go in the back loop, and I know that this one is in the center. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then I'm coming up to the end. So you'll of course keep repeating that pattern. For myself, I'm already coming to the end, and I have a drop down and then the single crochet. And your end is always going to match up with the beginning because you want the pattern to be symmetrical, okay? So we started with the single drop down, we're ending with the drop down and the single, so it matches up. And we chain 2, give it a cut, pull it, give it a tug, and there you go. Okay, so for row 5, I've got my chain 2 here. We're going into the first stitch with a single crochet, then 1 in the back loop, drop down, back loop, drop down, and then we have our 3 drop down, back loop, drop down. So single crochet in the back loop, then a drop down, single crochet in the back loop, drop down in the next. Then we have 3. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, and you see these 3 white loops? We're starting the pattern going on either side now of that drop down. So we're going drop down, back loop, drop down. And now we want to end like we began. So we've got a single crochet in the back loop and a single crochet in the last stitch, chain 2. Give it a cut. Okay, so we've completed row 5. Now we're on to row 6. So we're back to B. We'll make a slip knot, chain 2, and single crochet into the first stitch. Okay, now I'm going to do back loop in the next 2. So 1, 2. Then I have a drop down. The drop down is going between, so we've got that little loop available. So 6 is a repeat of row 3. So now we have back loop in the next 2. And then in the center of these 3 is where our drop down goes. Single crochet in the back loop of the next 2, then that you should be in that drop down with that loop on its own. And then we end with a single crochet, chain 2, and cut. Okay, and that completes row 6. So row 7, I've worked my single crochet in the first stitch already. Then we're going to have a drop down right away. Here is the loop that we need for that first loop. Then we're going to do 3. That double there is in the center of the 3. Then we have our drop down, back loop, drop down. Okay, so now we're going around this double. So drop down, back loop, and drop down. 3 in the back loop, 1, 2, 3. And now we're ending just again like we started. So we have that drop down, and then we have a single crochet, chain 2. Now I do get asked a lot about changing hook sizes and yarn, and for a blanket, honestly, you can use whatever you want, hook size, yarn. Just to get the exact size that I'm making, you want to go with the hook size and yarn that I'm using. So if you switch this up and did this pattern in worsted weight, you're just going to want to increase that starting chain. So there's a little tip there. So increase, you want to work multiples of 12. So let's say you do 12 times 12, then you do add 2 on the very end. Okay, so now I've completed row 7 and 8 is next. Row 8, I've started out with my chain 2 single crochet in the first stitch. I'm working a single crochet in the back loop. Then I'm working a drop down. Okay, so I'm gonna have drop down, back loop, drop down. So here's those 3 together. So I've eyeballed that out. Drop down, back loop, drop down, and 8 is a repeat of row 5. So a lot of these rows are repeating themselves, just sometimes in the opposite color. Then we do 3 in the back loop. 1, 2, 3, and then drop down, back loop, and drop down. Okay, and then I'm going to work in the back loop and a single crochet in the last stitch. Chain 2. Okay, so row 9, I've started with my single crochet. We've got 2 in the back loop. Let's see, 9 is a repeat of row 3, which is an easy one. We've got our drop down and it's going in that loop on its own. Then we work 2, 1, 2, and then you should have your drop down going in between these 3, and then that's making your point for that diamond shape. And 2, and a drop down, and then 2, and ending with a single crochet. Chain 2. Cut. So you can see how easy it is to make this beautiful pattern. And with the double border, hiding all these tails makes it so much easier than having to do all of that weaving. Okay, so we've completed 9. Now we're on to 10. Okay, so row 10 is a repeat of row 4. We have a single crochet in the first, then we have a drop down, then 3 in the back loop. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then our drop downs are going on each side of this white. So drop down, back loop, drop down, and then 1, 2, 3. And then we've got, let's see, how did we start? So we end with our drop down and a single crochet in the last stitch. Chain 2. So for row 11, it's a new row one we haven't done yet. So I've single crocheted in the first, doing a back loop in the next. Then we have a pattern of drop down, back loop, drop down, back loop, drop down, back loop. So that just repeats itself. So drop down, move that out of the way, back loop, drop down, back loop, drop down, back loop. So you can see how easy it is to memorize it, just working along these rows. So even though you'll be working on a big blanket, it's really repetitive. Okay, and then a single crochet in the last. Chain 2 and cut. So this repeat is all the way to 22, so we still have a few more rows ahead of us. Okay, so I've completed 11 and we're on to 12 next. Okay, so 12 is a repeat of 4. So we're going to do our drop down. I've already single crocheted, do our drop down, and then back loop of the next 3. 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to do, let's see. Then we have drop down, back loop, drop down. So back loop, sorry, drop down, back loop, and drop down. And then 3 in the back loop. So 1, 2, 3, and then we're dropping down the end here and then working a single crochet, chain 2. And you can really see that the pattern is starting to come together. Okay, these are big diamond shapes that we're creating with this little pattern in the center of them. Okay, so 12's complete. We're now on to row 30. So I've worked a single crochet in the first. We're going to do a back loop in the next 2. So let's see, 13 is a repeat of row 3. Okay, so back loop, and then we'll do our drop down, back loop next 2, and then drop down, back loop next 2, and then a drop down. Back loop next 2, and then I'm going to do a single crochet in the final stitch, chain 2. 14 is a repeat of row 5 with B, working a single crochet in the back loop, then a drop down, single crochet in the back loop, a drop down, single crochet in the back loop of the next 3, and our drop downs are going on each side of this double crochet. So drop down, back loop, drop down, back loop, and then a single crochet in the last stitch, and chain 2. Okay, so for row 15, it's a repeat of row 4 with A. So I've chain 2, let's single crochet into that first stitch, and we're starting off with that drop down, back loop of the next 3, and then we've got these 3 loops. We're doing a drop down, back loop, drop down, 1, 2, 3, and then we'll have a drop down, and a single crochet in the last, chain 2. Okay, so 16 is a repeat of row 3 with B. We'll chain 2 and a single crochet in that first stitch. And then we're working back loop of the next 2. And we drop down in the center of these 3 loops. And that's finishing off the gray shape. You can see that there. Back loop next 2. And then dropping down into there. 1, 2, drop down. 1, 2, and a single crochet in the last stitch. Chain 2 and cut. Okay, row 17 is a repeat of row 5. We're working in the back loop and then drop down, back loop, drop down, and then 3 in the back loop. So back loop, drop down, back loop, drop down, and then we have 3 in the back loop. 1, 2, 3, drop down, back loop, drop down. Okay, and I'm ending with back loop and then a single crochet. In the last stitch, chain 2, cut. Okay, so for 18, let's take a look here. 18 is a repeat of row 4. So we're dropping down, then 3 in the back loop, drop down, back loop, drop down. So let's do it. Okay, so drop down, back loop of the next 3, 1, 2, 3, and then drop down. Back loop, drop down. 1, 2, 3, and then we're ending here with our drop down. And a single crochet in the last stitch. Chain 2 and cut. Okay, so 19 is another repeat of row 3, so we've got 2 in the back loop, drop down, 2 back loop, 2 in the back loop, drop down, etc. We've done this one quite a few times, so we're dropping down to the back loop of the next 2, then drop down between these 3. Okay. Drop down next 2. Sorry, I keep messing up my words. Back loop of the next 2. Drop down. Back loop next 2. Drop down. Back loop next 2. Single crochet in the last. Chain 2. Okay, row 20 is a repeat of row 5 with B. Okay, I've chained 2. Let's single crochet in that first. Work in the back loop. Then we're going to have a drop down. Single crochet in the back loop. Drop down. And then back loop of the next 3. Drop down. Back loop. Drop down. Back loop, and then single crochet in the last. Chain 2 and cut. Okay, so for 21 is similar to 11, but it's a little bit different. It's a new row, so we're dropping down, back loop, drop down, back loop, drop down. So we're doing every other again. We're just starting with the drop down. So drop down, back loop, drop down, back loop, and we're just repeating this all the way across. Single crochet in the last, chain 2, and cut. Okay, so we're to 22, which is our final row. So it's with B, a repeat of row 5. So we're working a back loop, drop down, back loop, drop down, and then the 3 drop down, back loop, drop down. So I've chained 2, joining with a single crochet, back loop, drop down, back loop, another drop down, and then 3. So 1, 2, 3 in the back loop. Drop down, back loop, drop down, back loop, and ending with our single crochet, chain 2. Okay, so I've worked through that full repeat with you. The repeat for the pattern, okay, is going to be, let's take a look at our chart. It's 3 through 22. So now you're going to work rows 23 through 149. You're going to repeat row 3 through 22 6 times. Then you're going to work row 3 through 9 one more time. Okay, so what that's going to do, if you look at my chart, 3 through 9 is our 23 through 29, and that's just going to make the blanket symmetrical, so it's going to look the same ending as we started out. So again, that's 149 rows in total. You're going to repeat 3 through 22 6 more times, and then 3 through 9 one time. And that is going to complete the mosaic portion of your blanket. Then to finish things off, we're going to do a double border in color B. Okay, so if you're making it like the blanket pictured, you're going to complete the double border in B. You could do it in A, it's really up to you. And I'm going to put in a clip now that shows how to make the double border. I'm doing it for a different blanket, not specifically this one, but it's going to be the same process. The only difference is you're going to be working with the 6mm hook. Now, when you do your slip stitch edging that I'll show in the next clip, you're going to still use the larger hook. So do your larger hook for your slip stitch edging, because you want those slip stitches nice and loose to work into, but then when you go ahead and you work your double border in the double crochet stitches, you're going to use your 6mm size. Okay, you're going to have 3 rounds in total, and it's going to look great when it's all finished. I'll pop up more pictures for you, but you can trim all these tails. So once you get it all done, trim your tails so they're not so long, and watch the next part of the video that will show you how to make it. So I finished off my little swatch with a row 3. I'm going to cut that. And I'm going to trim up the tails, okay? So you want to keep these fairly short just so you don't have a big mess when you're trying to do your double border. Okay, I'm going to show you with a different color to make it easier. You can follow along with your pattern, but this is how you will make a double border. It will work for any of my patterns, and I'm going to demonstrate it with this color so it's easier to see. We can join here into any stitch along the top, and we're going to slip stitch. We're going to slip stitch all the way over to the corner. At all of our corners, we're going to chain 2 to make that corner. And then we're going to slip stitch down, and you want to go through each row. So we can see here, here's the white, here's the green, white, green. So make sure you get a slip stitch for each row, okay? And just make sure that you're not doing these slip stitches too tight, or they're going to be a real bugger to work into when we do the next round. Just keep them nice and loose. This works for any of my blankets or dishcloths or anything that requires a double border. Just follow along with the pattern for the colors that you need to use. Okay, and then when you get to your corner, we're going to chain 2 and now work it all the way along here, up here, and back, and then I'll meet you up there. Come into the end here. So what you want to do is cut this off. We're going to do a seamless join to finish this. Take your yarn needle and you're going to go under both loops of the very first stitch. Okay, and this is sort of a faux loop. You're going to go back through the center. Okay, and that's sort of making another faux loop. Now what you can do, because this will all again be hidden, we can just give this a knot, just kind of like our, I don't want to pull it too tight because I don't want to distort the stitch. And then you can trim, and then that can get hidden in the border as well, rather than weaving it. So you have a nice seamless join. Here you can see this blanket, I've gone with the light blue. And even I find it's nice, the light, it's so much easier to use a color, so the white is really hard to see, even though I've done the double border in the white, but it's up to you what color you want to use. And then this is how our border is going to look. Now we're going to switch over to the smaller hook. Grab my smaller hook, my 4.5, so my G+. Now it's important that you start this on the wrong side of your work. Because what we're going to do is be working into this back loop, back leg of that slip stitch we made. And this is why it's nice it being in a color that you can see. Join in. This is the most tedious round you are going to have, okay? Pull it through. We're going to chain 3, and that is going to count as our first double crochet. Now we're going to work double crochet in each of them. As long as you've made those slip stitches fairly loose, you should be okay. So then what we're going to do when we get to this chain, we're going to do a double crochet in just the one loop of the chain. Okay, and then we're going to chain 2. And then you're going to do a double crochet in the next loop, just the one loop of the chain. Then we're in a double crochet those back legs down. Okay, like I say, it's going to be a slow go for this round. The front side's a lot easier to work into. So you're going to just do the same thing all the way around here. You're going to go just work your double crochets, and then every time you get to the corner in the one loop of the chain, you're going to do a double, chain 2, double, and just work this all the way around. I'm going to meet you back up at the top. So I've worked all the way around. Now what we're going to do is slip stitch in the third chain of the chain 3. So 1, 2, 3, chain 3. And for our blankets, we're doing 2 more rounds. And those round 2 and 3 will be worked exactly the same. So I'm just going to do round 2. I'm not going to do round 3 because I don't think it's necessary. But if you're working the blanket, just work through the pattern and do the 3 rounds total. So now what we're going to do is work double crochets. This round's much easier now. We're just working right into the stitch. And when you get to your corner, you're working a double in the 1 chain, chain 2, and a double in the 1 loop of the other chain. And this is it. You're just working into the established double crochets and then doing the same thing in all the corners. So I'm just going to work it off camera. I'm going to meet you back up and then we'll flip it. I'll show you how to do the front. Okay, so we're going to slip stitch in the 3rd chain of the chain 3. And now my blankets have another round, but I'm going to stop here. You can actually make your border as wide as you want. So really as many rounds is fine. So let's just snip that off and flip it over to the right side of our work. So now all these ends we're going to want to go inside that border. We could weave this end in now, so we don't have to later. Okay. So what we want to do now, again, you can join in any place. We're going through the back loop only of the stitch. So it's worked really similar to the other side. It's just now we're going through this back loop, leaving the front loop exposed. We're chaining 3. And then this is just a lot easier to work into than that back leg was. So we're working across double crochet stitches. I just love actually how this little edge looks. Now, if you're really brave and you want it all in white, go for it. It's just harder to see, that's all. But if you're brave and you want it all white, but I actually, with this design, I really liked the color. Some of them are hard still to get into if you've made the stitch too tight. And this is where I did the join. Sometimes if you got to do that, you got to do what you got to do to get in there. So this round can still be a little tedious getting in to all these slip stitches. And some hooks are pointier than others, so you may find with your hooks, getting a good one with a good pointy tip on it helps. Okay, and then when we get to the chain 2, work a double, whoops, work the double, chain 2, And you just gotta find the other chain 2, the other chain of the chain 2. And then I find when we get to the edge here, it kind of helps if you just tuck all of your tails, just sort of fold it down and then work. And that should make it a little bit easier. Whoops. Okay, so I'm just gonna work it all around off camera. It's easier that way. Just make sure your corners, you're going into those chain 2s and chaining 2 for each corner. Work it really just like we did the other side. So once you get all the way around, this is how it's looking. You've got your nice edge. And then this is basically the same as the back. We're slip stitching into the 3rd chain of the chain 3. We're chaining 3 and then working double crochets into each of our established double crochet stitches now. So whatever you do on the back, you do on the front. If you do If you do 2 rounds, do 2 rounds. If you do 3, do 3. And then when you get to your chain 2, you're doing a double, chain 2, and in the next chain, another double. So just repeat that all the way around. Slip stitch this to join. And what we're gonna do is join the border together, we're gonna join into the chain 2. So I'm just gonna get this end out of the way. Before we get into that. Okay, so we're gonna be, I didn't do my border as wide, so some tails are still sticking out a little bit. We could trim these a little bit more. Just to make it a bit easier. Now what we're gonna do is join the border together. It's just gonna sandwich everything, hide everything together. So let's join up in the corner. Okay, so we're gonna single crochet, chain 2 and single crochet in every corner, okay? Okay, so now let's take a look at the stitch. We're gonna go through the back loop and front loop there closest to us. Okay. So back loop and then the loop that's closest to us. Just make sure you tuck all the tails in as you go. So just continue in that manner and I'll meet you at the, when you get to your corner, you're gonna single crochet, chain 2, single crochet, all in the corner, and then you're just gonna repeat this around. It's a little snug for me fitting the tails in with only doing the 2 rounds, but I've squished them in You're just going to keep going all the way. So when you get back to the start, you're going to just slip stitch in the first single crochet to join. Fasten off and just weave in the ends, and that is how you complete the double border for your blankets.